into. There are not a lot of notes to take in with this, but again, there's some key nuggets, there's some key things that I mentioned or that you hear me mention. Grab them down. Grab them down. So, let's roll. If you're familiar with The Mandalorian, you get the title of this assignment pretty well. And you might get an idea of what we're going after. Texture, tracking. Texture tracking fob. The tracking fob in The Mandalorian. How many folks are familiar with that? Seen it? Many of you. Okay, that tracking fob, that thing, that little mechanism that starts to beep rapidly when the Mandalorian or one of the guild members is close to their high-value targets, right? And so we're looking at tracking textures in this module. We're going to be looking at tracking textures, finding textures, grabbing textures, eliminating, taking textures, finding textures. And so we've been talking all throughout this semester about Italo Calvino's book, Invisible Cities. You've been working from those texts. And there's a surrealist, kind of dreamlike experience that goes along with those texts. And so we're playing off of that idea of surrealism, right? This is kind of this place that could exist in a dream. Calvino writes it in a way that the places could be real. Maybe they couldn't be real. There's no way this could be real. But it's written in such a way, in the poetics of it, that it is almost dreamlike, almost consciousness, out of the mind, right? And so we're playing with surrealism. And in the early part of the 20th century, so the early part of the 1900s, there's this movement, surrealism. There's the surrealists, a bunch of artists concerned with how do we unlock the mind and delve into creativity, right? You see us playing with these things all the time, right? Taking objects and collaging things together to create meaning, right? To create a new reality. Looking at how things can come together, looking at how the mind works, what comes out of the mind. And one of those exercises, one of those ways of unlocking creativity that they looked at was this frottage, or frottage, as I... Frottage. Frottage, as I always botch up. Frottage. So, frottage, French for rubbing. And if you're familiar at all with rubbing, you might have done this in an elementary school art class. Many of you, I'm sure, have, with either chalk or crayons, have done the textures of leaves and rubbed the textures of leaves, or maybe just by accidental. You were doing a drawing this semester on your desktop, and as you were shading something in, realized, oh, there's all the texture and the carvings from my desktop now in my drawing. And so this was a way of, and I'll show you some images here, a way of looking at textures and thinking about the connection between what we see and how we might draw it, or how we might feel it, or how we might see it differently. And so we're playing with what the surrealists played with, frottage, and we're going to do rubbings in this module. And so rubbings, carefully pressing paper onto a surface, and then applying graphite, or colored pencil, or crayon, for example, and when you apply that evenly and apply a certain even amount of pressure, you're going to be able to get surface textures. The things that are projecting on that surface are going to turn dark. The things that are recessed in that surface are going to not capture the graphites. They're going to remain white. And so again, you've probably done some level of this with leaves. I mean, nodding heads if this is something maybe you remember in the recesses of your mind of elementary school. Yes, we've done this. We've looked at this before, or played with concepts of looking at leads. And maybe some of you guys have created collages in elementary school or in high school or in an art class where you took one, as you can see here, and see the leaf texture in the background, but then the student now is getting the texture, the wood grain, on what looks like probably this picnic table here, and start layering, you can get some really neat and interesting effects. Depending on the material you use to capture these, whether it be graphite or a charcoal, or whether it be a crayon or colored pencil, this is a really nice way of abstracting something that we can see, feel, and touch, right? Being able to take it to another level, to take it and work with it and look at it and view it in a new way. So again, seeing this coming from nature, right, with the trunks of trees, being able to find some really great textures. Or if you've seen Indiana Jones, I think it's The Last Crusade, right, going through and rubbing the tablet. I think it was Sir Arthur, I forget who it is. I was looking for the clip, it got too late. But this is from that scene of Indiana Jones, right? This idea of rubbing, to be able to find the texture, to be able to take that with you. Water meters, I've seen some really great art out of rubbings out of water meters or other metallic pieces, brick textures. This is something that you guys could get into here as part of this assignment. But when you do these things, they yield some really interesting, some really beautiful textures, really beautiful pieces. And so exploring the grains of wood, exploring what might be a perforated surface, maybe burlap, or even it looks like maybe it could be even a chain link fence of some sort. But you see the textures that are just beautiful here. People will do this in old cemeteries or on tombstones or grave markings, especially in historic areas. Be able to find really great carvings and grave markers and doing rubbings of those. But just again, a ton of images of just to show you the beauty and the quality of what we're going to want to be going after in this module. Okay? This idea that the surrealists were looking at was they were taking the object, right? We're looking at the object, and then through rubbing, we're able to generate an abstraction. And that's where that Frottage comes from, this idea, this analog, this two-dimensional abstraction of the real object. And then they would take that and through an interpretation, so through unlocking what they're seeing and experiencing in their mind of those patterns, a completely new and different thing. Does that make sense? So taking an original thing and then through a process, right? One process of many, abstraction. And in this case, the abstraction we're using is rubbing, to then be able to take those rubbings and do something completely different on the other end. Do something completely different and interpret it in a new and creative way. That was a part of this game that the surrealists were working with in this exercise. And so then you get art by Max Ernst that looks like this, right? Is it a dragonfly, or is it four leaves and something else there, right? A thistle, or so you can get some really neat results from the act of rubbing, the abstraction, and then the reinterpretation. Taking and finding textures, abstracting them, and then reinterpreting. Reinterpreting. So our goal in this module, now they're collaging here in this way. Again, taking the rubbings, abstracting them, and then reinventing them. And in this module, we're going to be looking at capturing, creating a catalog, a database, an inventory, a library of different material textures, utilizing various materials, graphite, charcoal, color pencils, crayons, carpenter pencils. The idea is you're going to want to think about what type of materials can I use to get a rubbing? What types of surfaces or material textures will I want to go hunt down to get and yield some really interesting rubbings? He's great.
Yes.
Thanks, Richard.